you're more easily able to see my screen. Now, as we begin our conversation here today, I would like to, of course, have a few conversations with you. And as we begin our conversation, I would really like to start off with, when you hear that phrase, making thinking visible, what does that mean? You'll notice the question states in the Collaborate board, what does it mean to make thinking visible? How do you currently make student thinking visible? And for our coaches that might be joining us here today, let's go ahead and reverse that question and maybe think about, how do we make teacher thinking visible? Now here, of course, this could be within Nearpod. This also could be strategies that are utilized outside of Nearpod as well. For those of you that might be just getting started, remember you can utilize the Collaborate board text window at the bottom center of your student participation window. This is where you can type your responses. And when you're ready, you can click the blue send arrow to provide your response. Let's go ahead and toggle over to your student participation tab or window, and let's actively participate and share our insights and strategies as to how we make student or teacher thinking visible. Again, we will continue the conversation at approximately 1 minute. For those of you still working on your post on the Collaborate board, we have about 10 seconds before we transition and share some of your strategies. You get about 10 seconds. For those of you that have visual access to my screen, you may have noticed that the timer has expired. I'd like to encourage you to come on back to my shared screen right here in Zoom. As you return back to my screen, or as you're finishing your thoughts and posting real quick before you come on back, I'd like to go ahead and share some of the strategies that we're using throughout Jefferson County. Now we have a wide variety of course, different posts that are placed here. So thank you so much for sharing some of those tried and trues. Here we have Allie. Welcome, by the way. You mentioned using Post-its. I remember certainly utilizing those, not just with students, but also with teachers as well. Shout outs on Smart Panel. Yeah, absolutely. Jamboard. I know that has definitely picked up steam over the past couple of years. And notebooking. Yes, very good. Excuse me. Next door, Timothy mentions I've used the Collaborate board. Absolutely. Again, with my students before, but you would also use gallery walks and Jamboard. Yeah, that was one of my favorite strategies in the classroom as well, is really engaging students. For me, I'm a former history teacher. So I used to certainly engage them in different historical texts or primary resources associated with the different units that we were studying throughout the year. And those gallery walks would indeed be around the room where they could engage in the different texts and then incorporate those ideas into much larger concepts or ideas that we were focusing in for that particular unit. Next door, we have Grace. Again, frequently use ALM, great strategy, by the way, such as, again, the gallery walk, some of those examples, and think, pair, share. That is a popular one that I hear quite a bit. And then one more here, we have Catherine, again, sketching out drawing and design ideas. Yeah, so remember that when we are looking to make thinking visible, oftentimes, the first thing we tend to go towards, at least in our minds, is maybe some sort of writing component. But remember that when we are making thinking visible, is that it might be best to maybe take it from a multimodality approach. And we're going to talk about that in terms of how we can open up opportunities to really have students show a more authentic view of their student depth of knowledge. And I'm really glad Catherine brought that up, because that's such a key aspect when we're wanting to make thinking visible. Again, sometimes we tend to stick in one lane, right? When we are, looking for particular results, where we can actually open up more choice for students, which actually, believe it or not, gives us more depth of exactly what students know. So I do want to thank everyone for sharing their thoughts here. And of course, we're going to incorporate several of your ideas into today's conversation, and also dive into other ideas as well. As we make our way into the conversation here today, you'll discover that we're going to really focus on three key ideas. One is we'll talk about, leveling up our questions and the impact that has when we are wanting to make thinking visible. And I think we can all agree, certainly as educators and coaches that are joining the conversation here today, the types of questions that we ask oftentimes certainly are reciprocated with a particular response, whether it be what I consider to be more low-level responses, whereas what we're hoping is to help scale and scaffold students to higher levels of rigor and engagement with the content. And as that's true, we need to adjust our questioning, not just to help support that growth of content within students, but also to reveal the different proficiency levels of students so that we can reveal that thought process. Excuse me. In turn, by, of course, keeping in mind, adjusting and adapting and really asking a variety of different questions, is that also is going to require different responses. And this is where, of course, what Catherine's thought is, it's not just the fact that we might hone in on one particular aspect of learning responses, which we tend to gear and gravitate towards writing, is we might actually open that up and provide students with other modality opportunities. Again, to share their depth and connection to content, because ultimately that's what we're looking to gather, is that authentic insight in terms of what students know and what they are familiar with, so that we can provide targeted supports in elevating their understanding of content mastery. And then lastly, which I kind of mentioned not too long ago, is really offering choice. So when we are looking to, not just foster independence, but provide potentially tiered learning pathways, and also those multimodality opportunities within Nearpod, here you'll discover that we can easily, certainly utilize the versatility of Nearpod features, which isn't necessarily an extra step on our end, but it's just more so being aware of what the features offer and how we can use them to our advantage in order to provide more choice for students. And we're going to see that in a multitude of different ways in today's conversation. As we begin today's, of course, work, I wanted to start off our conversation by, again, returning to another Collaborate board. This time, we're actually going to ask a different question. That is, when we're thinking, again, in respect to either teachers, if we are instructional coaches joining today, or if we are teachers supporting students, let's talk about the questions that we ask our students in general. And I'll go ahead and hide the names to protect the innocent. So please feel free to be open, to be honest here. Do the questions you ask your students require high levels of thinking? And then how do you know? Let's take another good solid minute or so to reflect on that particular question and to share our insight. And remember that I went ahead and hid the names, so please feel free to be honest. It could potentially be that, maybe you believe that no, I don't ask, let's say, high level questions for one reason or another. However, you might also have a different response to that question. Let me go ahead and transition the conversation over to you, allowing you to toggle over to your student tab or window, and we will return to this particular question in approximately 1 minute. For those of you still working on your response in the Collaborate board, we have about 20 seconds before we all come back together. Again, about 20 seconds. If you have visual access to my screen, you may have noticed that the timer has yet again expired. I want to encourage you to come on back to my shared screen here in Zoom. And as you return, I'm going to go ahead and expand my window again and share some of your responses. Now, like I said, is that I'm going to go ahead and keep the responses anonymous for this particular question response. Starting off with, we have a great response here, which is questions can be open-ended. Again, why or how? Questions that require more student input. Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. Next door, great point. You said yes, but it can always be improved when they explain their reasoning with evidence. So yeah, I agree with that. Is that I think that this is a critical skill that we're all working on. Not just our students, but our teachers and even ourselves, right? This is a skill that we continue to refine over time. Next door, a great point here. You mentioned in teaching a world language, it's hard to move beyond DOK2. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Sometimes it's difficult. To tap into higher levels of learning, especially when we are adjusting that depth of knowledge question. However, we're going to talk about that today in terms of, what are some different ways that maybe we can scale that experience, even for world languages. Next door, again, students can't just answer the question by simple recollection of what they previously have been told or learned. Yeah, that's a great point. So, we just can't simply, keep asking them the same question, because then all we're really doing is just reinforcing content, which is key. However, if we're looking to kind of put them in that uncomfortable zone of learning, is we have to ask them, varied questions, right? We have to ask them questions that scale a little bit, right? That ask them to infer different information. We have to ask them to maybe apply their knowledge set in order to, of course, reach a higher plane or growth of learning, which we'll talk about more in detail. A couple more, asking students to explain their responses. Again, you go on by saying, why do you think that? Or what proves that? Yeah, good. So just don't leave it, right, at just the base question. Extend it, right, to dive in more deeply. Good. Again, it ties into that mindset of making thinking visible, right? So it's not just the fact that you know the answer, but why. As I kind of scoot down just a little bit, you mentioned questions require critical thought and not just a straightforward answer. Yes. So that is indeed really the key focus here. And then one more here. Yes, but a variety of levels, high levels of thinking attempted often. Yeah. So, I understand as a former educator that we might find ourselves where we do need to, constantly find that ebb and flow of questions that we ask our students, right? That again, it's not just maybe reinforcement and those quick little check for comprehensions, but also where we are asking students questions that might be just out of maybe that zone of where they feel comfortable, again, enabled to grow and learn. Now, as we are thinking about different ways for us to ask questions, I actually wanted to give you some samples here, and this is going to be a lot of fun. So first of all, oftentimes when we're thinking of Nearpod is, one of the bigger questions would be, what are different types of questions and ways that we can support student learning? And how does that look inside Nearpod? You'll see that what I have designed here for you are actually 4 different samples. Now, I can tell you that 2 of the learning samples here, 2 of the activities, are designed to be more supplemental. So, of course, they're designed to help students maybe support that foundational understanding of content. And it is designed in order to have students refer to certain information in order to recollect or strengthen that understanding of content. Whereas the other 2 are more accelerated. They're more rigorous. They're meant to apply their knowledge or access resources, and then, of course, apply that newfound knowledge to the question that they are currently engaging in. We're going to do a little fun activity, which is I'm going to release you utilizing the live to student pace toggle switch to each one of those 4 samples. Now, you'll notice that in a moment, you'll have the freedom to navigate through all the different samples. Please feel free. If you would like to play, if you would like to, dive into those different activities and give it a shot, you're more than welcome to do so. However, I want to point out that at the very last slide, I believe in my mind, I believe it's slide 19, you'll discover that this is an open-ended question. And it's just asking you to recall and think about, what are some of the differences between the activities, especially when we are building more supplemental experiences for our students versus those that are meant and designed to be more rigorous or to help with acceleration of learning. Let me go ahead and toggle on the student pace toggle switch. I'm going to set it to 19. I'm just going to double check just to make sure that that is right. And yes, it is. I'm going to go ahead and turn on that switch for you. You'll notice that if you have visual access to your student participation window, you now have arrows that are orange on the right side of your screen, at least for the moment. Notice that now you can navigate through the selected zone of activities. And remember that at the very end, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys access to that recording there. Remember that at the very end, which is slide 19 that you see here, this will give you an opportunity to reflect and share your experiences and what really jumped out to you. Remember, if you want to use this as maybe your notes as you engage in each one of the activities, that's a great strategy. So for example, if you wanted to maybe talk about the first activity, which is the math, early years math example, if you wanted to talk about, of course, the different strategies that were applied to that activity, you can, of course, place your notes here and then jump back to what would be the second activity, and then continue to explore and identify some of the ways that you can utilize Nearpod, again, in order to reveal student depth of learning. Let me go ahead and transition the conversation and experience back to you. Now, I am going to give you just a little bit more time, as you would imagine. This will require us to take just a little bit extra to dive in and look at some of those learning samples. Let me give you a good solid 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, I would like you to explore each one of those activities. So if you're keeping time, about a minute per activity. And at the very end, I'll give you a heads up when we're in that final minute, because then I want you to make your way to slide 19 and begin to reflect and recall some of the ways that the different activities supported and identified the depth and learning visibility of either students or teachers. Let me go ahead and start the timer and encourage you to toggle over to your student tab or window. And remember that once the timer expires, we'll come back and have a small conversation about the different strategies.
I will always remember the day you kissed my lips like today. It went just like this. No, it's never been better than the summer of 2002. We were on Dancing on a hood in the middle of the woods of an old Mustang, where we sang songs with all our childhood friends. Oh, now, whoops, got it all promising you.
For those of you that have access to my screen, you may have noticed we're down to about 2 minutes. So at this point, you should have made your way to the last activity, or at least the second to the last. Remember that in 1 minute, we'll make our way to slide 19, where we can share our observations. Again, 1 minute before we make our way to slide 19. If you have visual access to my screen, you may have noticed that the timer has expired. If you wanted to finish up your thoughts, absolutely want to encourage you to do so. However, I also wanted to share those ideas that have already posted to the open-ended question. So as you're finishing your thoughts, I wanted to identify some of those observations. Grace, I wanted to share your ideas here today. You mentioned the activities allowed students to draw their thinking or see a diagram to understand a concept. Yes. So, right off the bat, with that first little early elementary math sample, you may have noticed that, of course, the goal was relatively structured, right, to help maybe guide the student through the learning. But at the same time, what's great is that built into that activity was a way to intervene and provide what would be a tiered support system. So as we may be applying multi-tiered systems of support, that is a great example of how we can provide, let's say, that moment of intervention for students to where they can access utilizing the reference media, which is where you saw all the images and the URLs and the videos and the audio. All that is reference media, and again, that could be utilized strategically in order to support or accelerate or enrich that student experience. I'm really glad that you caught that. And then you also mentioned to diagram, again, to understand the concept. Yes, right, to kind of take it to the next level. Let's go ahead and scoot down just a little bit. I don't think we've called on Leslie today. Leslie, it's great to have you. You mentioned program requires students to interact with slides. Questions had students to show or prove their knowledge with answers. Yes, so keep in mind that we're actually going a lot farther than just a program that's interacting with slides. We actually have the ability to receive formative assessment feedback and identify the learning needs of students in the moment, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So just kind of restructure that thought is that, Nearpod is so much more, right, than just simple slides. It gives us the power to, again, not just engage students in content, but the ability to assess students in real time, as well as the power to adapt and provide intervention strategies in the moment that they're learning, which is something that I know as a former educator, I loved. We'll come back to that idea very quickly. We have, let's see here. I don't think we've called in Sarah here today. Welcome, Sarah. You mentioned they allow various ways for students to share their thinking. Yeah, so, you may have noticed that there was the ability to, and I think this is kind of a callback to Catherine earlier, talk about multimodality opportunities, is we have the ability to, of course, not just provide students access to audio, but also to record their own audio, the ability to draw. You may have noticed that with Draw It and with Drag and Drop, you may have discovered that there are some updates that have been applied, which also gives you the ability to, within Drag and Drop, upload your own video content, which means that you can create that student learning artifact and bring it into Nearpod. You can also utilize a student equation creator, which I know we've seen on the teacher side. However, now students have access to it via the text tool, and also via the text tool as well. Students can also utilize a hyperlink, which means that not only can they provide their evidence of learning, but also should they create a student learning artifact, they might have maybe a preview link or a direct link to their resource. They can link it into Nearpod, providing you access to that content. So as we continue, of course, establishing our mindset and thoughts, it's incredibly important to reflect and think about the types of questions that we are asking, because oftentimes when we start to engage our students in the different activities, like I said, is that this gives us the unique advantage of providing our students with a view of their learning. Now, I'm circling back here. I'm actually going to see if anyone has engaged in these activities. Looks like a couple of us has. And you'll see that we actually have the opportunity for those that have actually edited or worked on the responses. You are given a live look in to the different work. So here, looks like Sarah was just kind of playing around. But notice that Sarah utilized that drag and drop to place it right here on this particular learning sample. But recall that you also have the ability to utilize the annotation tools. You have the ability to upload your own images. You have the ability to upload your own videos and text. Again, all of this is meant to help support and reveal that student depth of learning. And this is where I wanted to emphasize and mention that this is where it becomes important for us to fully understand what the different features of Nearpod can do. Because, if we're just simply using, again, drag and drop for that sole purpose of just simply dragging and dropping resources, I think we can understand that, of course, that's going to serve its benefit up to a certain point. We've now placed, a ceiling on the learning opportunities and learning outcomes that could take place. However, if through questioning, we incorporate maybe those annotation features, we incorporate, maybe that evidence-based support of where we have students, provide evidence of why their response is correct, that completely changes the entire dynamic of the learning experience and really does dive into that depth. Again, maybe students, as revealed through this activity, might know what the correct answer is, but maybe not necessarily why, because all they've memorized is the fact that this is just the correct answer. Well, we know that that particular understanding and mindset is going to cause some issues later down the road, because in order to scale and grow within the proficiency of content, is students do have to have a strong understanding of not just what the correct answer is, but also the why. What's the rationale, what's the buildup, what's the explanation of why this is the correct answer. And it's only by establishing that frame of mindset is where we have students that are able to scale to higher levels of learning proficiency. Now, as I X out of that particular sample, I wanted to circle back and just continue our conversation. And where I wanted to go next was really just different ways that we can then really document the learning. So I wanted to show you a more advanced way, and this is a lot of fun, of where we can actually incorporate some of our content features in order to document the learning. So first and foremost is we're probably well aware that all of the Nearpod activities absolutely, give us the opportunity to document and of course record that formative assessment data for us that we can reveal and analyze in the moment or in our Nearpod reports. However, with the exception of interactive video, all of the content features, even some of our favorites, which includes PhET simulation, Nearpod VR, and Nearpod 3D, all of these, because they are content features, they're meant to deliver information to our students and not collect formative assessment data. Now, if you're like me as a former educator, I would love to see, the different, let's say, variables and the different sort of ways that students are manipulating the different toggle switches of PhET simulation in order to drive different results within that real world lab. I would also like to see visually within those different VR experiences what students are looking at and how they are applying that visual understanding of content to other critical skills and ideas that we have discussed in class. And the same is true for the 3D model. As students are navigating and moving about, what are those different ways that students are engaging in that particular aspect or content? Now, what I want to point out is that, again, even though all of the content features do not have the ability to collect formative assessment data, with the exception of interactive video, that's not to say that we can't be creative and have students capture their learning in different ways. And this is what I want to show you, because this is a great strategy to apply, especially if we are looking to scale the level of proficiencies and to make learning visible, even when students are utilizing content features. So let's talk about that right now. So first and foremost is I wanted to kind of share with you just a real quick hyperdoc, and we will come back to this particular sample. This is an example, by the way, just to kind of precursor this, where we can offer choice to students. And you may notice that I actually have a wide variety of different choices that you can make. Notice that these are all student paced. I have a PhET simulation right here. I have two 3D objects, one on the skeletal system, the other one in animal cells. And then I believe these two are Nearpod VR. So this one going to the Paris catacombs. And I believe, if my memory serves me correct, this one is going to the Redwood Forest. Oh, there it is right in the title. So it absolutely is. Now, what I would like you to do is, if you would like, go ahead and click on any one of these learning samples to join me. And what I'd like to do is, as I click, I'm going to choose the animal cell just for my sample. We're going to make our way to that particular content feature. Now, I'm going to join as a guest just to make things easy and fast. Please feel free, if you want to log in with your single sign-on. Of course, you can. But when you arrive in that sample lesson, we're going to make our way to the actual content feature. And depending upon what you selected, you may know that you have the ability to manipulate that content feature just a little bit. But remember, you don't have the ability to populate the visibility of what students are applying. So let's say that students are identifying, for this sample, different parts of an animal cell. And, maybe we're just kind of curious, what are the different associations that students are making? And just to keep things real simple is, let's say that maybe we encourage students to capture different visible learning objects, so within that content feature, so that we can later bring it in to Nearpod as Drive. And you'll get to see this here in a minute. But if you're using a Windows device, you might discover that you have the ability to use the snipping tool. Or if you use the quick keys, which is for Windows, it's Control, Shift, and 4. You'll notice that you have the ability to have these little crosshairs like you see here. Now, like I said, you can also go to the snipping tool. If you see the Windows icon in the lower left corner of your screen, and then just type in the search bar snipping tool, you'll see that you have the ability to make different screenshots. Now, if you're utilizing, let's say, an alternative device such as a tablet, remember that students can also, zoom in, like you see here. Let me get off that for a second. There you go. Can zoom in, and then also on their device, take a screenshot, and then ultimately bring that in through the photo reel into the draw, which you guys are going to see here in a second. So with the snipping tool, or by holding down what would be the Control, Shift, and 4, you're going to get the crosshairs. And here, all we're doing is that we're just snipping an image of, I guess, a part of that visual learning journey. And you'll see that once we make that snippet, it gets placed in different locations. It might be placed in your documents. It might be placed in your recent folder. Again, you might want to check with your IT team to see exactly where it goes. I know for me, it gets dropped to my desktop. So what I wanted to share with you, I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit. I'm going to jump back to the primary presentation like you see here. And I wanted to just talk through with you how we are able to bring in those different visual snapshots and then ultimately annotate and extend that learning to make learning visible. So for example, you'll first, of course, within your Nearpod lesson, we are going to strategically place the different content features at key points of learning. So again, whether you decide to use PhET simulations, Nearpod VR, Nearpod 3D, you're going to encourage your students to use the snipping tool or take screen grabs or screenshots of the different visual connections to content. Then on the very next slide, whether we are building or doing it on the fly, which I'm actually going to show you how to do here in a second, is we're going to upload those snippets, those images into Drawit. Now, you might ask yourself, why are we using Drawit? Well, one of the reasons why we're using Drawit is because you have the ability to upload images directly to Nearpod. Now, I will tell you that as time has gone on, that's not the only feature that we have the ability to do this in. I want to point out that you can also do this in drag and drop now. So in the event that you would prefer to use drag and drop, you absolutely could, which in my brain would be a really cool way to actually bring in, those sort of like student, draggable objects, because hypothetically they could bring in the image and then they can move them to the different categories that you have set up for the draggable columns, if you will. And essentially they are using student created artifacts to support their learning within the drag and drop. But like I said, just as a sample, I'm going to go ahead and just launch a very quick activity, which is draw it. And again, the same power can be used with drag and drop. And then here, I'm going to say upload your visual evidence. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. For your learning. Now, as I click share, if you wanted to look back to your student tab or participation window, and I'll model this on my teacher view screen here for you real quick. Like I said, is just like drag and drop, as you would see here with Drawit, is you have the ability to upload images. So as you click the image upload, I'm going to move the question up here. You can, of course, browse for files. And here you can actually search for that snippet or series of snippets. And I'm going to scroll down. And then this is the image that I took a snapshot of. So I'm going to go ahead and upload that image right here to Drawit. And like I said before, is that now I have the power to not only directly annotate on that image, but also I can extend my learning by maybe providing my own understanding within text. And again, what's great is that this provides you with that opportunity, again, to not only make thinking visible via activities, which we all know we can easily do, utilizing the versatility of the different tools, but here you can also apply that same strategy to the content feature, by just simply adding an extra layer, which would be either that drag and drop or draw it feature like you see here. And remember that as you are kind of like playing and exploring, remember that both with drag and drop and draw it, you would then be given a live look in. And also that data would not only be available in real time, but also would be stored in your Nearpod reports. Now, I did want to pause here, maybe for a minute or so, just to let you practice and try it yourself to upload that snippet that you had made previously with your particular student-paced content feature. Remember that you should still have that particular object open. However, I will be a gentleman and leave my screen up for you guys in the event that you wanted to maybe use mine as a quick little snippet and then upload it to the drop board. And I'm going to pause here for about a minute. And soon after, we're then going to talk about how to then provide that tiered learning experience, which you had just seen a moment ago, utilizing Google Slides. Let's give ourselves maybe 10 more seconds or so, about 10 more seconds. Again, hopefully that was enough time for you to take a little snippet of my object here. And I'm going to circle back over and see how we're doing on the teacher end here. And Timothy, I was just looking at yours. That is probably about 5 steps ahead of me, my friend. So I have to admit, I typically use a nucleus because sadly, that's about all I remember from my, maybe 3rd, 4th grade science class. So if you remember anything outside of that, my hat goes off to you, my friend. Very good. But again, like I said before, as you guys are kind of like uploading your images, remember, this is a cool way to incorporate those content features into Nearpod, and then also add that layer of visibility by having your students annotate. And again, the whole point behind it is really to reinforce and to help students, strengthen, and not only strengthen, but also help students rise in their level of understanding of key concepts that we are, of course, promoting and certainly engaging our students with within our classrooms, Jefferson County. Now, as I close the activity, I did see we had a couple that were still working here, but I am going to go ahead and close it just to make sure we have the opportunity to finish up our conversation here today. I do want you to go ahead and come back to my shared screen here in Zoom. And where we are going to end today is precisely where we actually just got done taking a peek at, which is how exactly do we create different hyperdocs and what does that look like? So I'm actually going to show you visually another sample here. Now this one's a little bit different. You may recall that with the last sample, we actually utilized student-based lessons that were reduced down to essentially what would be kind of like a title slide and the content feature itself. These are a series of different student-paced lessons. Now, you might ask yourself, why are we using student-paced lessons? Well, remember that if we use synchronous or live participation, then that would mean you would have to, navigate and move all of those. I mean, not to say that you couldn't, but I would urge you when you're utilizing more of a tiered or more of a choice experience with your students to go ahead and switch over to either student-paced or preview, which means that we will not be collecting the data from that experience. Now, a couple of things I want to bring to your attention is all I did to create this experience is that I utilized a single slide in Google Slides. I just took a quick little screen grab of the title slide and then brought it into Google Slides. And then over it, you'll see that I attached the student paste hyperlink. So you guys know that in Google Slides, all you would have to do is just select that image, insert hyperlink, and then the hyperlink that you're inserting would be the student paste link. And then just to kind of show you, I'm going to go ahead and just choose this example right here is once you make that selection, it will then navigate. I'm going to join as a guest again. And you'll see then students can then actively participate utilizing the multi-tiered systems that we have supported. So this particular one, of course, is really kind of, touching on, the Dust Bowl and, some great work. I can't remember off the top of my head what that particular image is called, but, in American historical studies, incredibly famous. As we jump back, I wanted to also point out like another way that we might decide to utilize this, especially if, let's say, there's a pre-assessment. One of the strategies I used all the time is before we would come to a hyperdoc, I would actually have a pre-assessment quiz. And then in Nearpod, when you use a Nearpod quiz at the very end, it'll give you a score. So let's say hypothetically, maybe the quiz was out of 5 points. So what I would do is on the very next slide, there'd be a hyperdoc. And then this is where I would have those tiered learning experiences. And then in my head, I would think that, hey, if we're looking at, let's say, out of 5 points, those that had scored a 1 and 2 probably need more support in understanding some of those more foundational understandings of the content. So right above, I would say, if you scored a 1 or a 2, this is your learning journey. And in this particular experience, I would adjust the DOK questions to be more foundational, to be more supportive, very similar to that mass sample that we saw earlier in the presentation, where the reference media and just the overall engagement was meant to be more guided to help support the learning of the students. Now, in the middle, this would be, of course, geared towards our 3s and 4s, which again are those rising towards mastery of this particular skill, the standard. Typically, this would be, of course, the experience of where we kind of anticipate students to be. However, the highest tier, which would be those that had actually scored a 5, that have mastered this particular skill. This is the one that we would actually create a more rigorous experience that actually goes above the standard. And again, what's great is that above each one of these, you can actually label that if you scored a 1 or a 2, a 3 or a 4, or a 5, this is actually how you can create those tiered learning experiences all within one particular point in your Nearpod experience. And what's great is that when students click on the student paste links, not only will we receive that data reporting within what would be, of course, our Nearpod reports, but remember, we can also click on the view progress of each one of these tiered lessons, and we can have a quick look in to see how students are progressing, even when they are working independently, maybe in peer collaborative groups, or even as a whole group, as everyone is kind of working together, working on their different tiered learning opportunities. As we're wrapping up our conversation here today, I do want to thank everyone for your kind participation.